Launching into section 102 of the Doctrine and Covenants. Good morning, it's Jeff Downs, and we are studying the Scriptures together on Streaking the Scriptures. Yesterday we finished up 101 with quite a few references to parables, and also a parable in itself that the Savior gave to the prophet Joseph Smith. Now we're moving forward into section 102. This is minutes of the organization of the First High Council of the Church at Kirtland, Ohio, February 17, 1834. The original minutes were recorded by elders Oliver Cowdery and Orson Hyde. The prophet revised the minutes the following day, and the next day the corrected minutes were unanimously accepted by the High Council as a, quote, a form and constitution of the High Council of the Church, verses 30 through 32, having to do with the Council of the 12 Apostles, were added in 1835 under Joseph Smith's direction, when this section was prepared for publication in the Doctrine and Covenants. Minutes from a meeting. Okay, so this ought to be interesting, and why included in the Doctrine and Covenants, we'll find out here. If you're new to the podcast or this study session with us, I have not pre-programmed this study session. In other words, as I read, I share with you my thoughts and feelings, and as we study together, learn different things that these scriptures may apply to, how these scriptures may apply to us. I don't go much into context. I mainly go into application and context. There's a lot of really great podcasts out there for people who have studied the history of the church that can give you more context. I'm going to just read, and then study with you together. Verse 1, this day a general council of 24 high priests assembled at the house of Joseph Smith Jr. by revelation and proceeded to organize the High Council of the Church of Christ, which was to consist of 12 high priests and 1 or 3 presidents as the case might require. The High Council was appointed by revelation for the purpose of settling important difficulties which might arise in the church, which could not be settled by the church or the bishop's council to the satisfaction of the parties. Joseph Smith Jr., Sidney Rigdon, and Frederick G. Williams were acknowledged presidents by the voice of the council, and Joseph Smith Sr., John Smith, Joseph Coe, John Johnson, Martin Harris, John S. Carter, Jared Carter, Oliver Cowdery, Samuel H. Smith, Orson Hyde, Sylvester Smith, and Luke Johnson, high priests, were chosen to be a standing council for the church by the unanimous voice of the council. The above-named counselors were then asked whether they accepted their appointments and whether they would act in that office according to the law of heaven, to which they all answered that they accepted their appointments and would fill their offices according to the grace of God bestowed upon them. The number composing the council who voted in the name and for the church in appointing the above-named counselors were 43 as follows: 9 high priests, 17 elders, 4 priests, and 13 members, voted that the High Council cannot have power to act without 7 of the above-named counselors or their regularly appointed successors are present. These 7 shall have power to appoint other high priests whom they may consider worthy and capable to act in the place of absent counselors. Voted that whenever any vacancy shall occur by the death, removal from office for transgression, or removal from the bounds of this church government, or any one of the above-named counselors, it shall be filled by the nomination of the president or presidents and sanctioned by the voice of a general council of high priests convened for that purpose to act in the name of the church. The president of the church, who is also the president of the council, is appointed by revelation and acknowledged in his administration by the voice of the church. And it is according to the dignity of his office that he should preside over the council of the church, and it is his privilege to be assisted by 2 other presidents appointed after the same manner that he himself was appointed. And in case of the absence of one or both of those who are appointed to assist him, he has power to preside over the council without an assistant. And in case he himself is absent, the other presidents have power to preside in his stead, both or either of them. Whenever a high council of the Church of Christ is regularly organized according to the foregoing pattern, it shall be the duty of the 12 counselors to cast lots by numbers, and thereby ascertain who of the 12 shall speak first, commencing with the number 1, and so in succession to number 12. Whenever this council convenes to act upon any case, the 12 counselors shall consider whether it is a difficult one or not. If it is not, 2 only of the counselors shall speak upon it, according to the form above written. But if it is thought to be difficult, 4 shall be appointed, and if more difficult, 6. But in no case shall more than 6 be appointed to speak. The accused, in all cases, has a right to 1/2 of the council to prevent insult or injustice. And the counselors appointed to speak before the council are to present the case after the evidence is examined in its true light before the council, and every man is to speak according to equity and justice. Those counselors who draw even numbers, that is, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12, are the individuals who are to stand up in behalf of the accused and prevent insults and injustice. In all cases, the accuser and the accused shall have privilege of speaking for themselves before the council after the evidences are heard and the counselors who are appointed to speak on the case have finished their remarks. After the evidences are heard, the counselors, accuser and accused have spoken, the president shall give a decision according to the understanding which he shall have of the case, and call upon the 12 counselors to sanction the same by their vote. But should the remaining counselors, who have not spoken, or any one of them, after hearing the evidences and pleadings impartially, discover an error in the decision of the president, they can manifest it, and the case shall have a rehearing. And if, after careful rehearing, any additional light is shown upon the case, the decision shall be altered accordingly. But in case no additional light is given, the first decision shall stand, the majority of the council having power to determine the same. In case of difficulty respecting doctrine or principle, if there is not a sufficiency written to make the case clear to the minds of the council, the president may inquire and obtain the mind of the Lord by revelation. The high priests, when abroad, have power to call and organize a council after the manner of the foregoing, to settle difficulties, when the parties are or either of them shall request it. And the said council of high priests shall have power to appoint one of their own number to preside over such council for the time being. It shall be the duty of said council to transmit immediately a copy of their proceedings with a full statement or the testimony accompanying their decision to the high council of the seat of the first presidency of the church. Should the parties of or either of them be dissatisfied with the decision of said council, they may appeal to the high council of the seat of the first presidency of the church, and have a rehearing, which case shall there be conducted according to the former pattern written, as though no such decision had been made. This council of high priests abroad is only to be called on the most difficult cases of church matters, and no common or ordinary case is to be sufficient to call such council. The traveling or located high priests abroad have power to say whether it is necessary to call such a council or not. There is a distinction between the high council or traveling high priests abroad and the traveling high council composed of the 12 apostles in their decisions. From the decision of the former there can be an appeal, but from the decision of the latter there cannot. The latter can only be called in question by the general authorities of the church in case of transgression. Resolved, that the president or presidents of the seat of the first presidency of the church shall have power to determine whether any such case, as may be appealed, is justly entitled to a rehearing after examining the appeal and the evidences and statements accompanying it. The 12 counselors then proceeded to cast lots or ballot to ascertain who should speak first, and the following was the result, namely: 1. Oliver Cowdery, 2. Joseph Coe, 3. Samuel H. Smith, 4. Luke Johnson, 5. John S. Carter, 6. Sylvester Smith, 7. John Johnson, 8. Orson Hyde, 9. Jared Carter, 10. Joseph Smith Sr., 11. John Smith, 12. Martin Harris. After prayer, the conference adjourned. Oliver Cowdery, Orson Hyde, clerks. What'd you think? This brought back some memories. I served on a stake high council for many years and was entreated to the opportunity to be on a council where there was an individual that was accused of grievous sin on several different occasions, to come before the council and to receive from the council the decision on what was to happen with their membership. Today, this council is largely reserved at the stake level, largely reserved for the most difficult cases, and has been modified to more closely align to what we received here from the Lord in the Doctrine and Covenants. I think this is one of the most merciful, wonderful things that happens in the church as far as helping individuals to repent that is not spoken of. It's one of the places where the Lord's atonement is most significantly shown and felt and not said, because it's such a sacred, significant event. When an individual comes before a presiding authority and confesses a sin that has some magnitude behind it, they then are privileged to have a council. That council can be at the ward level with the bishop and his 2 counselors, or at the stake level with the stake president and his 2 counselors, and on rare occasion, the stake president, his 2 counselors, and the full council of 12 high counselors. And this is the traveling located high priests abroad have power to say whether it is necessary to call such a council or not. It's the council of high priests abroad is only to be called on the most difficult cases of church matters, and no common or ordinary case is to be sufficient to call such council. This, I think, is important, that there are significant, difficult, complex cases where you need a council of individuals to really be able to ascertain what is the needed judgment in order for the individual to have the greatest opportunity to return to Christ. We talk about councils, and this is mentioned quite frequently throughout this section. Councils are important organizations. And a scripture that gives that away in here was, and this I always found interesting. It says, and after, let's see here, in all cases, the accuser and the accused speak for themselves. This is verse 20. Verse 20. But should the remaining, so the individual has gone through a council, a decision has been made, and now this verse. But should the remaining counselors who have not spoken, or any one of them, after hearing the evidences and pleadings and partiality, discover an error in the decision of the president. Okay, this is quite significant. And why is that? Because it shows that we're all fallible. That no matter if you're called to be the president of an organization, or a counselor in that organization, or in this case, one of the high priests, or in any position, that we have fallibility, that we can make mistakes. which is why it's so important to counsel together. Today, in the local organization of the church, you have the ward, in which you have the ward council, composed of the leaders of each of the different organizations. And they counsel together in order to determine what the best way is forward to bring people in that local congregation to Christ. That counsel helps to guide and direct the affairs of that local congregation. There is a general handbook of policies and procedures that help to guide that counsel. And then it is inquiring of the Lord, the mind and will of the Lord. Because as you look at this, in case of difficulty respecting doctrine or principle, if there is not a sufficiency written to make the case clear to the minds of the council, the president may inquire and obtain the mind of the Lord by revelation. In each council, there is a presiding authority who then has the privilege and also the responsibility to ask the Lord for his will if there is not sufficiency written to make the case clear. The General Handbook of Instructions is the opportunity for each council to be able to see what it is the Lord has revealed to the leading councils of the church and then communicated down to every local chapter, if you will, of the church, right down to the branch, which can have very few members. These councils are called of God. The individuals who serve thereon are called of God, and they together come to a decision. As I was reading just the first part here and thinking about the highest authoritative body in the church, which is the first presidency, and then the Council of the 12 Apostles, I think it's amazing that in 1834, the apostles, or the high council of the church, or the council of the 12 apostles, was called and formed and regulated. And as I was reading through this, I wondered if these individuals had any idea of how significant their calling was and what it would mean later on in life, or later on in the church's history today, where it is a worldwide global organization that has wards and stakes all over the world, where, as we were reading previously, there's a building program that goes on all over the world, that there is giving and there is receiving of tithes and donations, and there is all the different missionaries and all the different outreach efforts on behalf of the Relief Society and all of the different primary organizations and the young women's and young men's organizations. And all of this right here started 1834 with this council coming together and the 12 apostles first called, where they would counsel together. It was a tough start too. I mean, there was not, of the individuals that were called on the first high council, there are many of them, Oliver Cowdery, Martin Harris, others that left the church for a time. Just imagine if that were today, if we had a couple of the 12 apostles decide, you know what, I just have some differences and I'm going to move on. I mean, that would be quite significant. And all of it started right here with these individuals who, I believe, not really knowing the significance of what it was that they were really doing, but had the courage to step into that which they did not know and strive diligently to put together a council that would move the church forward. That the Lord called these individuals, that he made an administrative body that could put together a church and an organization that would allow all individuals to come closer to Christ. I think this is absolutely amazing. And that it is done today, for the most part, exactly as it was laid out here in Section 102. And here's what I mean by done today. Think about when a prophet passes on. So last prophet to pass on President Monson, and then President Nelson was installed as the next prophet and president of the church. What we have here, though, is the appointment of the newest apostles and how that happens. The above named counselors were asked if they accepted their appointment. So that is one thing too. You still have the agency. If they were called and didn't accept the appointment, there may be people in our day and age that's the case, and we've never heard of it. They may not have accepted it, but accept appointments, and whether they would act in the office according to the law of heaven. Laws are critical in governing the Lord's kingdom because it allows us a freedom that we otherwise wouldn't have. To which they all answered they accepted their appointments and would fill their offices according to the grace of God bestowed upon them. Now the number composing the council who voted the name for the church appointing the above named counselors were 43. So it sounds like there's a group of them that said, okay, we sustain these individuals. And what do we do in general conference today or in a solemn assembly? When a prophet, his counselors, or a new apostle is called, we sustain that in our general conference. High council cannot have power to act without 7 of the above named counselors. So there has to be a majority in order for there to be any action that takes place. And the 7 shall have power to appoint other high priests whom they may consider worthy and capable to act in the place of absent counselors. Now, I've been on high councils before of the church, of a stake, and there were times where we needed a full council, yet all the high counselors who were called were not available, and therefore there were high priests who were chosen to fill those temporarily while the other individuals were not available because of travel or other reasons. And they would fill that so that we had a full council. Voted that whenever any vacancy shall occur by death, removal from office for a transgression, or removal from the bounds of this church government, at any one of the above named counselors, it shall be filled by the nomination of the president or presidents. So when a member of the Quorum of the 12 Apostles dies, which is the way that they are released from their call, then the first presidency, right now President Nelson with his counselors, President Oakes and President Eyring, get together and they nominate an individual for the vacancy, and then a general council of high priests convene for that purpose to act in the name of the church. The president of the church, who is also the president of the council, is appointed by revelation and acknowledged in his administration by the voice of the church. So this, sorry, I skipped over a little part here, but it's the above named counselors shall be filled by the nomination of the president or presidents and sanctioned by the voice of the general council of high priests. So here again we have the order by which vacancies in the Quorum of the 12 Apostles are filled. And that pattern is the same in the stakes of Zion and also in the wards. Now in the ward you don't have a high council, but you do have a bishop and his counselors. And the bishop recommends who his counselors will be and submits that to the stake president, who then, with his counselors, determines whether or not that should be moved forward. And if so, then they're called. All of this done in order. All of this done in a way by revelation. Often, I've thought about this particular order. And as you look at the Articles of Faith and the Pearl of Great Price, I have to remember which one. I was telling you the other day, I think we have a streak with our son where he quotes one article of faith every day, and boy, he's got him down cold. You can say any number and in any order, and he knows exactly which one it is and what it is that it says. So I'm just getting there. Hold on just a second. I think it's the last page here. Yeah, Articles of Faith. Let's see. See, this is one of them. We believe in the same organization that existed in the primitive church, namely apostles, prophets, pastors, teachers, evangelists, and so forth. We believe that a man must be called of God. So this is 5. This is Article of Faith number 5. We believe that a man must be called of God. When any individual is called to serve in a president's position or a bishop position, it is done by God. It's called of God. How? By prophecy. There's been several times where I've gone through the interview process of being considered whether or not to serve in a specific calling. And what is it that the individuals who are interviewing striving to understand? Are they interviewing the individual for qualifications based on their worldly attainments, their accomplishments, and so forth? No. What they're seeking to do is understand the mind and will in God for the organization in that area, be it a stake or a ward or a branch. They're looking diligently to understand who the Lord would have serve there, and are then wanting that prophecy to be able to come upon them so that they can then call that individual. And it says they must be called of God, that a man must be called of God by prophecy, and then once called by the laying on of hands by those who are in authority to preach the gospel and administering the ordinances thereof. There is order in the kingdom. I can feel called and not ever be chosen. Now, that's okay, because there are many individuals who can serve in many different calls, and we can learn from them what the mind and will of the Lord is. Now, in our natural man state, that can be somewhat of a blow if, for example, you're being interviewed for a particular position of importance and you're not chosen. Does that then mean that the Lord has rejected you? That you are no longer, or you weren't found worthy by the Lord to serve in that particular position? I think you can definitely feel that way. I know I've felt that way, and it's difficult. But what's really happening? It's that the Lord has a specific need for a specific individual to serve at that specific time for that ward or stake. It's not to appeal to a person's desire for leadership or to be acknowledged. It's about how we can get more people to come to Christ. And whether or not you or I are called to any particular position does not matter. Now, that's hard sometimes. It's hard to feel and to hear that, I was not chosen to be in that particular position. But the real test of discipleship is to do the Lord's will no matter what. And if his will is that someone else should serve, then we accept that. Now, if it's hard to accept, can we appeal to the Lord and ask for his grace and his mercy and his help and his guidance and his understanding as to why you were interviewed for a particular position but did not receive it, and be able to receive that understanding and to receive his confirming spirit? Absolutely. Can he help us to put off the natural man? The natural man which wants to be acknowledged by the world. Well, that's not God's way. His thoughts are higher than our thoughts. His ways are higher than our ways, according to Isaiah. And whether or not we're called to certain positions does not matter. What matters is that we are true disciples of the Lord Jesus Christ, and that we do everything we can to serve in the callings where we are asked to serve. In Doctrine and Covenants Section 102, have so many the other thing I think about is, as we come to a close of our study session here, is that these minutes that were taken, one thing that's kind of sticky in my mind, it says, the prophet revised the minutes the following day, and the next day the corrected minutes were unanimously accepted by the high council as a form and constitution of the high council of the church. With two scribes taking notes, there still was necessity for the prophet to be able to look through and correct what might not have been understood. There is such a translation process that comes from the Spirit coming upon the president, prophet, or any individual, and then words being spoken for people to understand. That translation process can sometimes lead to incorrect words that are used to describe what was revealed. That's what I see and have seen as I've worked in many different councils of the church, that there are sometimes words which are written do not reflect what was actually decided or reflect the actual revelation of the Lord. And therefore, those words need to be modified and adjusted in order that we can have the most clarity regarding the Lord's kingdom and these councils. So the prophet, just like we read here, that if it's not sufficiently written to make the case clear on the minds of the council, the president may inquire and obtain the mind of the Lord by revelation. He can see what it is that was said and then correct as need requires the minutes or whatever else may have been discussed in order to have the purest, most accurate minutes, moments, record that we can have from the Lord. Doctrine and Covenants 102. Great section. I've read it many times when I was on councils so that as we counseled together, we could follow the Lord's will. I'd love to hear your thoughts, ideas, feedback. Give me an email at Jeffery, Jeffery, at mystreaksapp.com. Love to hear from you anytime. Until we study together again, I hope that you have a marvelous, fantastic, wonderful day. And as always, keep streaking the scriptures.